All right, so get this. You wake up, and it's pitch black. You can't move. And your wrist is throbbing. That's how Lee and Andrew Child decided to kick off their new Jack Reacher thriller. It's called In Too Deep. Talk about it starting with a bang. We're diving straight into that opening chapter. And trust me, Reacher's in a whole new kind of trouble this time.
It's like the authors are saying, forget the slow burn. We're going straight for the jugular. This is Reacher stripped down, vulnerable, in a way we haven't seen before.
Exactly. And the way they describe it, you're right there with him, feeling that cold metal digging into your wrist, tasting blood in your mouth. And the worst part, he has no clue how he got there. Total amnesia.
Which, let's face it, is terrifying for anyone. But for Jack Reacher, the guy who's built a career out of knowing everything about everyone, it's a complete game changer.
Right. It makes you wonder, how does Reacher even function without his mental encyclopedia?
Yeah.
Of combat moves and street smarts.
Yeah. That's the question, isn't it? Will his instincts be enough? Or is he going to have to relearn everything on the fly? And remember, someone put him in this position. Someone who likely knows exactly who they're dealing with.
Okay, so while Reacher's stuck in this, dark, painful mystery, the excerpt shifts gears and introduces us to a guy named Ivan Vidich. Now, Vidic's no angel. He actually saw the whole car crash that led to Reacher's capture.
But he wasn't just a bystander. He was following the car Reacher was in, a Lincoln Navigator driven by someone named Gibson. And the way it's described, it sounded like he was practically tailgating.
So is he just in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Or is there something more going on here?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. Vidic is actually happy about the crash, almost relieved. So clearly, this accident plays right into whatever scheme he's cooking up.
It's like the authors are dangling a juicy secret in front of us. We know Vidic is connected to what happened to Reacher, but they're not giving us the whole picture yet. It makes you want to lean in and say, okay, what's the catch?
Totally. Now, after the crash, Vidic checks on both the driver and the passenger. He finds Gibson, the driver, dead, a broken neck. Pretty brutal.
But the passenger, presumably Reacher, is still alive. The Vidic even comments on how Reacher's size and strength probably saved him. And it takes two other guys, including one named Darren Fletcher, to even move Reacher's unconscious body from the wreckage. They actually needed a pickup truck.
Which, knowing Reacher, is not surprising. But here's where it gets even weirder. Vidic claims he doesn't know who Reacher is. Says he didn't find any ID on him. The only thing he found was a Glock 17.
Hold on, a Glock 17, the FBI's standard issue sidearm. What's a guy like Reacher doing with an FBI weapon? Are we supposed to believe that's just a coincidence?
Right. It's like the authors are dropping breadcrumbs, leading us down a very specific path. It makes you wonder if maybe Reacher's past is a lot more complicated than we thought.
And if that's the case, how much of that past will he remember? Will it help him get out of this mess, or will it make things even more dangerous?
Good point. Because remember, Reacher is starting with zero intel, no allies, no weapons, and now a possible connection to the FBI. This is shaping up to be his toughest challenge yet.
It definitely raises the stakes. We're used to seeing Reacher take on bad guys, but what happens when the lines get blurred? What happens when he can't trust his own memories?
Okay, so we've got Reacher waking up in captivity, no memory of how he got there. We've got this shady character, Ivan Vidich, who's clearly up to no good. And we've got this Glock 17 that hints at a possible link to the FBI. It's a lot to unpack. And we're just getting started.
One of the things that make the Reacher novels so gripping is the way the authors slowly reveal information, layer by layer. They give you just enough to pique your curiosity, but hold back enough to keep you guessing. And this excerpt is a perfect example of that.
It's like watching a masterclass in suspense building. And what makes this even more interesting is how this amnesia changes the whole dynamic. You know Reacher's going to fight back. But how can he even start to plan when he doesn't know who he is or who's up against?
It's like someone hit the reset button on his life. And now we get to watch him piece it back together, one punch at a time.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about the writing itself. You mentioned those sensory details earlier. The feeling of the metal, the taste of blood. The authors don't shy away from the brutality of Reacher's situation. But it never feels gratuitous.
Right. It's visceral. But it serves a purpose. They want us to feel Reacher's pain, his disorientation, because that's what makes his eventual comeback even more satisfying. And it makes you wonder, if even Reacher is struggling, how much danger is he really in this time?
That's a great point. It's almost like they're saying, look, even Jack Reacher can be brought down. But then that spark, that relentless drive, is still burning inside him.
And that's what keeps us hooked. Because we know, sooner or later, those captors are going to learn a very hard lesson. They messed with the wrong amnesiac.
You got that right. But the question is, how will he do it this time? Without his memory, without his usual resources. How does Reacher even begin to fight back? We'll dive deeper into that in just a bit.
You know, it's funny. We always think of Reacher as this unstoppable force, this guy who walks into a town and single-handedly takes down corrupt cops, mob bosses, you name it. But this time, it's different this time. He's not just fighting external threats, he's battling his own mind, his own lost identity.
It's almost like the authors are playing with the classic lone wolf trope. We're so used to Reacher being self-reliant, almost superhuman, but taking away his memories, that's like stripping Superman of his cape suddenly. He's a lot more human, a lot more relatable.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, someone put him in this position, someone who knows how dangerous he can be. They're not just dealing with the Reacher of now, they're anticipating the Reacher he might become if those memories come back.
Okay, back to Ivan Vidich for a second. We know he was following Gibson. We know he's got some hidden agenda. And we know he's connected to Reacher somehow. But what's his end game here?
That's the puzzle, isn't it? Is he working alone? Or is he part of something bigger? Remember Darren Fletcher, the guy who helped Vidic move Reacher? What's his story?
I'm telling you, something's fishy with those guys. Like, they just happen to have a pickup truck big enough to haul Reacher. It feels planned, almost like they were expecting to snatch someone of his size.
That's a good point. It suggests a level of premeditation, of organization, which means Vidic's got resources, connections. He's not some random opportunist who stumbled onto a car crash.
And let's not forget the Glock 17. What if Reacher was working with the FBI before all this? Maybe he was undercover, deep in some operation that went sideways.
That would explain a lot. Maybe his amnesia is the result of some kind of trauma, a cover-up gone wrong, or maybe it was intentional, a way to protect him from something even more dangerous.
Whoa, that's a whole other level of conspiracy. And if that's true, it means someone out there is waiting for him to put the pieces back together. Someone who wants to make sure those memories stay buried.
Exactly. It's like the authors are setting up a ticking time bomb. We know Reacher's memories will come back eventually, but when they do, what will they unleash?
It's like that game Jenga. Every memory Reacher recovers is another block pulled from the tower. And we're just waiting to see when the whole thing comes crashing down.
You know what I find fascinating? Is how this amnesia changes the way we view Reacher, usually. He's the one with all the answers, the one who sees the angles everyone else misses. But now, he's as much in the dark as we are.
It's a great way to level the playing field, don't you think?
Yeah.
Suddenly, he's vulnerable, fallible, and yet there's still that underlying sense of inevitability. Like,
Yeah.
no matter how bad things get, you just know Reacher's going to find a way out.
That's the beauty of the character. Even without his memories, he's still Jack Reacher, that core of resilience, that quiet menace. It's all still there, simmering beneath the surface.
And that's what makes this excerpt so intriguing. We're not just watching a classic Reacher beatdown. We're watching him rebuild himself, piece by bloody piece. It's a different kind of challenge. But I have a feeling he's going to relish every minute of it.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be honest, who doesn't love seeing Reacher dish out a little payback? But this time, it's going to be personal. He's not just fighting for justice, he's fighting to reclaim his own life.
And let's be real, those guys who grabbed him, they have no idea what they've unleashed.
Underestimating Jack Reacher is always a mistake, whether he remembers who he is or not.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the plot, the characters, the whole amnesia twist. But let's take a moment to appreciate the craft of this excerpt, the way the authors weave together action, suspense, and character development.
You're right. It's not just about the plot. They create this palpable sense of tension, of impending danger, even in the quiet moments. Like when Vidic examines Reacher after the crash, you can almost feel Vidic's calculating gaze, weighing the threat Reacher poses, even while unconscious.
It's that attention to detail that makes the story so immersive. You're not just reading it, you're experiencing it. Like the way they describe the weight of Reacher's body, the effort it takes to move him. It gives you a real sense of his physical presence, even when he's down for the count.
And that's important, because it reinforces that classic Reacher image.
Right.
He's not some superhero with magical powers, he's flesh and blood, but he's also incredibly strong, incredibly resilient, even when he's at his most vulnerable. There's this underlying sense of power, of potential energy just waiting to be unleashed.
It's like they're reminding us that even a wounded lion is still a lion.
Exactly. And, the amnesia adds another layer to that image. We're used to seeing Reacher in control, always one step ahead, but now he's stripped of that advantage. He has to rely on pure instinct, on his raw physicality.
Which, let's be honest, is still pretty formidable, but it also makes him unpredictable. He's not bound by the same rules, the same limitations.
And that's what makes this scenario so exciting. We're about to see Reacher unleashed in a way we've never seen before. He's going to have to improvise, adapt, fight his way back from the brink of oblivion.
It's like watching a master warrior stripped of his armor and weapons, forced to fight with his bare hands.
You know he's going to make it look good.
It's like those old kung fu movies, where the master gets poisoned or blinded, and everyone thinks they're finished, but then they come back, using a whole new style of fighting, relying on senses they never even knew they had.
Exactly. We're so used to seeing Reacher outsmart his opponents, using his intellect and experience to predict their every move. But now, he's got to rely on something more primal, more intuitive.
Think about it. You're Reacher. You wake up in this nightmare scenario, no memory, no plan. What's the first thing you do?
Well, if you're Jack Reacher, you assess your surroundings. You gather every scrap of information you can, using your senses to build a picture of where you are, who you're dealing with, and you start looking for weaknesses, for opportunity.
Right. Like maybe the way the light filters through a crack in the wall or the sound of footsteps outside. Every little detail becomes a potential clue, a piece of the puzzle.
And this is where Reacher's military training comes in. He's been in survival situations before. He knows how to adapt, how to make the most of limited resources.
We've seen him escape from handcuffs, pick locks, even take down armed guards with his bare hands.
Exactly. So even though he's starting from a disadvantage, he's still got a unique set of skills that most people wouldn't even think of.
And let's not forget, the guy's a walking encyclopedia of combat techniques. Even if he doesn't remember the names of those moves, the muscle memory's still there.
It's like riding a bike. You never really forget how, even if it's been years. And in Reacher's case, those instincts are going to kick in when he needs them most.
So, to recap, we've got this high-stakes mystery, amnesia as a plot device, and a potential connection to the FBI. But it's not just the what that's intriguing, it's the how. How will Reacher overcome this challenge? How will he piece together his own identity while taking down those responsible?
And that's the question that keeps us turning the pages, because we know Reacher's going to win. But the authors have cleverly changed the rules of the game. It's not just about brute force anymore. It's about ingenuity, adaptability, and a whole lot of grit.
It's like they've taken everything we love about Jack Reacher, the strength, the resourcefulness, the unwavering sense of justice, and pushed it to the limit. And in doing so, they've created a story that's both familiar and completely unpredictable.
And that's the mark of a truly great thriller. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, questioning everything you thought you knew about the character and the world he inhabits.
So, for all you Reacher fans out there, I think it's safe to say that In Too Deep is going to be a wild ride. We're talking amnesia, conspiracies, and classic Reacher payback, all wrapped up in a story that explores the very core of who this iconic character really is.
And for anyone who's new to the series, this is the perfect jumping-on point, because even without all the backstory, you're getting a Reacher stripped down to his essence, forced to prove himself all over again.
It's like watching the origin story unfold in real time. And trust me, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
So until next time, keep those pages turning. And as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.